Okay, can everybody see this now that I have it up? So, yeah, my name is Tara, and I'm going to give you an overview of the REAP project structure and requirements. So, what I want to start talking about, I'll tell you what field types are targeted, to give you an overview of the 2 scorecard types that we'll be using, and the ecological and the carbon reducing indicators that make up those scorecards. I'll also point out some recommendations that are advised such that farmers can achieve high scores and hence the highest payments available. And I'll go through a couple of scenarios to show you how those scores translate into payments for the farmer. So what farm types are targeted, first of all? So it's all livestock and mixed farm enterprises that have some low input grassland. Or it's livestock mixed farmers who are planning a reseed. It's also for those farmers who are planning a reseed, it could also be farmers who have already put in a multi-species lay within the past couple of years. If they have put one in, then that can be used to be scored using the multi-species lay scorecard for this project too. So there's two separate scorecard types. There's a low input grassland scorecard. So it's called LIG now rather than LIP that you'll be familiar with from GLAS. And there's 3 parts. There's the field itself, the field margin, and the field boundary. And there's the multi-species lay scorecard for those field types, and that is the same, made up of 3 parts. So it's assessing the indicators from the field itself, the field margin, and the field boundary. So I'll concentrate on the LIG fields first, the low input grassland fields first, and tell you how to choose a suitable field for those. And we'll go through an overview of the scorecards for LIG fields and what the requirements are for those. So it's any enclosed grassland field that receives low inputs of chemical and organic nitrogen fertilizer. Unlike LIP in GLAS, it's suitable for a pasture or a meadow. So it should have a number of non-grass indicator species. It should have at least 2. It's a little bit different from LIP in that in LIP that you could have 3 non-grass species and that was a suitable field. But those 3 grass species could have been anything, just anything that wasn't grass. Whereas these are specific ecological indicators that will tell you the environmental health of the field. The field must have low amounts of ryegrass, under 30%, and the same as GLAS for LIP, it must not contain heather. For these field types, then that would it be expected that agricultural weeds will be controlled by spot spraying or mechanical means. Obviously, if fields are going to be boom sprayed, there's not going to be any indicator species that can be scored, so it's not in anyone's interest to have those. So the fields that are unsuitable for LIG, it's quite important now that these fields are not selected to come into the programme and come in, because it won't work. It won't work for you as advisors. It won't work for the farmer. They're not designed to fit into the scorecard. They won't receive a decent score, and they'll receive a poor payment if these fields are entered. They're not eligible. And you can search a ryegrass field for indicator species, and you won't find any. They're not going to be there. So the ryegrass wards are ineligible for this pilot. The next couple of slides, then I've got a couple of images of just examples of low input grassland to give you an idea of the sort of fields that will mean. So this one you can clearly see, well, the sward isn't comprised of ryegrass. It's got quite a lot of different grasses in there. And you can't see a lot of indicator species in there. You can see a good amount of yellow composite flowers, which could be dandelion or another plant in the dandelion family, scattered throughout the sward. So it's reasonable to assume that if you were to do a W-shaped walk in this field, as you would be doing, we'll train you how to do all of that in the training in early June, that you would expect to find a few more indicator species in there too, and they would be also reasonably dispersed in the sward. So that would be a good field type to select. Also, a rush pasture would be a different type of field that would be suitable for coming in. Rushes, I mean, if it's similar, if the field is boom sprayed, there's not going to be very many species in it, and it depends, of course, on the amount of nitrogen fertilizer that a field receives. If it receives heavy applications of fertilizer, then there's not going to be, there'd be more grasses and there'd be fewer indicator species there. A rush pasture, on the other hand, if it's completely neglected and it's infested with rush, such that the tussocks are taken over the field and it's difficult to walk through or to be grazed effectively, but that's not going to score very well either. So it's about having a balance in there. So I'll come on to the LIG scorecard itself, and we'll start with the grassland part of it, which is the main field part of it. And this slide you see in front of you, this is all of the questions that relate to the grassland part of the field part of the LIG scorecard. That's the 5 questions there. So there's 3 that will give you positive marks, and there's 2 that can take away marks. So the first question is, what are the positive indicator species that are found in the sward? And we have a predefined list. Now, that list of indicator species is, or plants, which could be more than species, it could be a group of plants. It does extend to 35, which it does sound like a lot, but we did have to include, because this is a national scheme, we have to be able to cater for wet grasslands, dry grasslands, grasslands that occur on any soil type, or any, will vary with geology as well. But in order to achieve top marks for question 1, you only have to get a total of 12 species in the field. And the next question is the cover of those positive indicator species. I've given just 3 example photographs of 3 indicator species that are included, and you're probably familiar with most of these. So the first one, the mauve one, is lady smock, or cuckoo flower it's called, and that's coming into flower now. It's often found in meadows and pastures, and it's even that's even persistent in some of the more fertilized fields. And bird's foot trefoil, there's a wet type and a dry type depending on your soil conditions. And the last one then is oxeye daisy, which is your big dog daisy. The next question is your vegetation structure, and that relates to, gives points to if a field is appropriately grazed. So what do we mean by appropriately grazed? Well, if it's completely eaten off, like by sheep or horses, such that it's the bowling green and there's no structure left in the sward, well, it's not contributing to carbon sequestration or climate or biodiversity, as well as if there was a more diverse grazing in the plot. And similarly, then, if a field is completely neglected and hasn't been grazed, then if there'd be marks in there for if there's thatch and litter levels that show the field has been abandoned in there. So what we're wanting is a balance. And the negative questions is cover of negative indicators, which does include ryegrass. So if you do have that ryegrass below 30%, you're getting marks. Not only will you not have the positive marks in questions 1 and 2, but you will have marks removed there. Also, then there's the noxious weeds. And is there any evidence of damaging activity to soil, vegetation, or water? So that's things like if there's bare soil and erosion, any damage to water courses from vehicles or livestock, hedges damaged by machinery, burning or dumping, that sort of thing. Also, for the low input grassland scorecards, there is a bonus payment available of €50 per hectare, and that's for late meadows. So that's a meadow that would be cut between July the 1st and August the 31st. The field must be shut up for 6 weeks before it's mown, and we will require a geotagged photograph within 5 days of the field being mown to verify that this took place. The next part of the low input grassland scorecard is fenced field margins. So what this is, it's simple, is what we're asking farmers to do is to put in field margins around their low input grassland fields, and they have the choice of which boundaries they put them on. Obviously, if they put them on all boundaries, they get higher marks. They have a choice of 1 metre, 2 metre or 3 metre boundaries, and all it means is moving the electric fence out a distance from the stone wall or the hedgerow or other boundary feature. There's extra points for riparian margins, and that's additional to the statutory requirements. There's the scorecard is designed so that these margins are heavily weighted, so that there will be approximately 40% of the total value of the scorecard. So it's really in a farmer's interest that they do have these margins. For the management of them, they must be established by the 15th of July or before you go out and assess the field, whichever is the soonest. And they must be managed to keep them eligible by either by mulched, mown or flailed. They must not receive applications of fertiliser or lime, no pesticides, and it is recommended to remove offtakes to reduce fertility. Then we're on to the last question on the low input grassland scorecard. And this is a combined question which combines looking at the density of boundary features per hectare, as well as the condition assessment of those. So GLAMS will compute this for you, but essentially what we're looking for here is just, you can clearly see the picture on the left is going to have an awful lot more value for biodiversity and for carbon sequestration than the field on the right, which has no habitat for any wildlife, and all hedges and boundary features have been removed, and little opportunity for sequestering carbon. The next part of that question then is very simple condition assessment, and we're only asking for condition assessment of 2 types of boundary features, stone walls and hedgerows. And you can see how simple it is here. The stone wall is either in really good condition, where it's stock proof and excellent condition, or it's in moderate condition, it's still stock proof and they might have a little bit of deterioration. Or it can be poor so that it's not stock proof and it's in some sort of stage of dereliction or completely derelict. So there's marks awarded for condition A and B, no marks for condition C. If you have a hedgerow, then it's the same, it's either in condition A, B or C. Now condition A and B are rewarded equally, and condition C is no marks. So it's rewarding hedges that are dense and well managed, dense at the base and well managed, or they can be tall and unmanaged and on its way to growing into a tree line, or else be a fully developed tree line. But if a hedge is over trimmed and is less than 1.5 meters tall with significant gaps, there's no points there for that. So that's all I'm going to say about hedgerows for today, and we'll talk about them a good bit in the training session in early June. So we're on to the second scorecard now, how to choose a suitable field for multi-species lay. So it's as I said in the first slide, it's any field if you have an existing multi-species lay that's used either for grazing or silage, and these fields tend to, the recommendations are that they last for 4 years, so I suppose if it's in there a couple of years, it will be suitable for scoring this year. Or it's any enclosed ryegrass field where you wish to reseed, and rather than reseeding with ryegrass mix, that we're asking for one of these mixes instead. To advise farmers where to put them, that there's not to be putting them where there's a risk of damage to water quality, which is a risk of runoff or soil erosion, or fields that have a heavy burden of weeds probably shouldn't be selected either, because it'd be difficult to address those problems afterwards once the crop is in place. What's the farmer got to do before August the 15th this year to establish the multi-species lay? So we're asking for at least three legumes or herbs to be included in the mix alongside the grass mix. So there's various ones. There's lots of different clover mixes, red and white, and in between outside clovers, and sandpoint chicory, yarrow, forage herb, burnet, parsley, lots of different ones. We're recommending that a 2-meter gap should be kept between the field boundary and the edge of the reseed. Onto the scorecard itself, there's less questions on the mixed species lay scorecard. So on the field part of it, before I get to the margins and the field boundaries, the field part of it is just these two questions. So it's how many sown non-grass species are present in the plot. And the second question is, what is the vegetation structure? So the reason that we're asking for the vegetation structure was to help with carbon sequestration, but it's also greatly to help with pollinators. I mean, a lot of these legumes and herbs are going to be of terrific value for pollinators, and they're a target that we wish to pay for in REAP. So if a field is completely, if it's mob grazed, well then you're not going to have any. You won't have any of these in flower, and you will have little variation in structure in the sward. So if it's a little bit more leniently grazed, well then, or grazed on a longer rotation, there'll be more diversity in sward height and structure, and more species flowering. And then we're on to the margins part, which is the same as in the low input grassland, except in this instance that there's a 5-meter margin option available here too. So a farmer can put in a 1 meter, 2 meter, 3 meter or 5-meter margin. And obviously the idea here is to encourage parts of the crop to flower to benefit pollinators. If a farmer's putting in a 1 or 2 meter margin, that might be outside of the crop, and it might just be around the boundary and the edge of the field. If he's putting in a 3 meter or 5 meter margin, well, that will encompass the crop itself, which has the most benefits to pollinators. There's a lot of marks going for these margins in this scorecard. It's up to 60% of the overall marks and payment, therefore, of this scorecard is for these margins. I don't need to go into the boundaries question, because that is the same. It's the density of field margins per hectare and the condition assessment of stone walls and of hedgerows, the same as for the low input grassland. So I'll go through a couple of examples then of scenarios, which I hope will make it a little bit clearer to you. So the first two are going to be on low input grassland. So this one is a 2.5 hectare field. So if we look at maybe the boundaries first, well, you can see on the east that there's a brown line, so that represents a post and rail fence or post and wire fence, whatever. That's not included it will be drawn on the map, but it's not going to be condition assessed, and there's no payment for that. The other boundaries, then you have a hedgerow in good condition at medium density per hectare. That's calculated through GLAMS, the density per hectare on the west and on the southern boundaries. And on the north, then there's a water course. And then the farmer has chosen to put in 2 meter boundaries along 2 sides of the field. So there's a low number of indicator species present throughout the field, and a low cover of those species that they're not readily found as you walk through the field looking for them. The field is more grassy with few indicator species. But the diversity in sward structure is good. Maybe it's had some mixed grazing, and it's grazed on a longer rotation. So if you take that, then the farmer's not going to score very heavily on the first couple of questions, but it's the good diversity in sward structure, and then you're taking the margins, 2 meter margins on 2 sides of the field, and the hedgerows that are there in good condition at a medium density. That leads to a score of 6 out of 10, which is €750. And you can see I've just repeated the field scores below, and you can see a score 6 out of 10 gives €300 per hectare. Of course, if the farmer decided, if he wanted in year 2 to meadow this field, and they wanted to apply for the late cut meadow payment, well then the score of 6 out of 10 on it would still get him €900 for this field. Scenario 2 is also low input grassland, and this is a point I haven't made earlier. It's the high number and cover of positive indicators in this field, and when you answer those questions on the scorecard, if those show that there are a high number, well, that automatically indicates then that it's a semi-natural grassland of very high ecological value. In those circumstances, there is no requirement to fence off the margins, because the fields at the boundary edges are going to be of the same quality as they are throughout the field. And the farmer will receive the full marks for having the field margins in place, but there's no requirement to fence them off. There's good vegetation structure in there too. There's stone walls around the west and southern boundaries. They're in condition C, so there's no marks awarded for those. Wire or post and rail fence on the eastern boundary, there's no marks for those, but he has got a mark for the condition hedge in condition A at a medium density per hectare out on the northern boundary. So all of that adds up to a score of 9 out of 10, which is €1,050, and a score of 9 out of 10 per hectare is €375. The last scenario is for multi-species lay, and the payment rates for this are lower to reflect the income forgone for these field types. It has a medium number of sown species, good vegetation structure again. Still has that post and wire fence on the east, not given any marks, and it's a hedgerow in condition A on the west and southern boundaries. But it's at low density of hectare, and it's calculated in glams, and a stone wall at the northern boundary doesn't get any marks because it's in poor condition. So adding all that up gets a score of 7 out of 10, which is €940 for that field, and a score of 9 out of 10 gives €250 per hectare for mixed multi-species lay. Complementary actions, there's 3, new hedgerow planting, gapping up a hedgerow, new tree planting. They're once-off payments verified through geotag photo app, and they'll be added to the farmer's annual payment in either year 1 or 2. And every farmer has a budget of €1,200 for those. In terms then of the support and the help that will be available to you, there'll be full training given to all inspectors and advisors in early June. This information brochure is available online. It'll be posted to, emailed to you, and it'll also be, you'll get a hard copy in the post later this week or early next week. You should receive that too. Also, every farmer who's accepted into the program is also going to be getting one of these information booklets. We have designed laminated scorecards for you to take into the field, and there'll be a tip sheet on the back of those with all of the questions for you to answer. We are also producing a species identification book, which is being designed and will be published in the next couple of weeks. That will be sent to you, so you'll be receiving that in a second post. And we are making a video on how to use the scorecards in detail, and that's under development now too. These are this is the most important slide, I suppose. It's a summary of what I've said so far. This is how to get, this is the advice that we need to get out to farmers as soon as possible. It's critical that the clients with suitable land are entered. So the suitable land for low input grassland, and also that it's, that it is a ryegrass sward that's selected for a multi-species lay reseed. So you're not selecting semi-natural grassland for that, or an unsuitable field that's going to have maybe water quality impacts, for example. I suppose the time is so short, so is anyone considering a late cut meadow bonus payment? They need to have the meadow shut up 6 weeks in advance. It's the last mowing date of August the 31st, so farmers to be alerted to that now. Field margins must be in place by July the 15th or prior to the advisor assessment, whichever is sooner. And I know that we've missed now the spring sowing date for reseeding. But the multi-species lays must be established and their margins established by August 15th at the latest. So that is that's the end of my presentation. Just there's further information online. There's the information booklet, the terms and conditions, and the specifications document. Specifications document is just 3 pages, just to let you know that, and I'll leave the email address and phone number up there on screen for you too. Thank you.